rainbow of people, and we were connected over interest, and that's not the same today. And I do think a lot of that interest-based connection was just coming together.
Hey there, Albion. Are you ready to discover the hidden gems of our community? I'm Cassidy Porter, your host and proud Albion resident. Join me on Brick by Brick, the podcast that celebrates the people, places, and stories that make Albion so special. Together, we'll explore the rich history of our town, from its manufacturing roots to its vibrant present. We'll chat with local leaders, volunteers, and small business owners to learn more about the incredible work they're doing to make Albion a better place. So whether you're a lifelong resident or just visiting, tune in to Brick by Brick, and let's discover the heart and soul of Albion, one story or brick at a time. Welcome back to the Brick by Brick podcast. I'm your host, Cassidy Porter, and today I have a special guest from the Community College of Allegheny County, Dr. Ketwana Schoos. Dr. Schoos is the current Vice President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at CCAC and teaches courses related to her multitude of degrees, including sociology, diversity and social justice, African American history, and leadership. Dr. Schoos is back in Albion for the Albion College's MLK Convocation as the keynote speaker. So thank you for joining me today and taking some time out of this quick whirlwind of coming back to Albion to speak with me.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. So before we kind of dive into your current roles and the education that you've acquired over the years, I would love to talk a little bit about your connections to Albion. So can you kind of tell me your Albion story?
Yes, I was born and raised here. Actually, about a block over. So we're here on Eaton Street. I grew up on Clinton Street. So on this 800 block of Clinton Street. So my parents, they're from the South. My dad is from a small town called Bessemer, Alabama, which is right outside of Birmingham. And my mom is from Vicksburg, Mississippi. Okay. And they came here in the 70s just because of the booming, industry. So I think Albion, Hayes Albion, but we call it invaluable, was a big draw for a lot of my family coming from the South, like looking for employment opportunities. And so my mom came up here because she had older brothers. She's from a bigger family, and just to connect. And she had my brother young, so she came up to raise him, outside of Mississippi. And my dad, because his mother they gave two options after high school: military or get a job. And he pursued a job. And he also had older cousins who had come up here in the 70s as well. So that's how I came to be here, because my parents migrated up from the South. And for me, growing up here was just ahead of the age of where we are in terms of technology. Like cell phones didn't really become a thing until I got to college. So I'm grateful for that in hindsight. And I've always been like the slower person to get onto that, because my childhood, when I think back, it was like outside. Yeah. I'm from a generation of like, just come home before the streetlights are on, right? And that was just kind of the rule of thumb in my family. So, you get to stay out a little bit later in the summer. Wintertime is getting darker earlier. But so I had neighbors and friends like on my street. So a lot just on my street, playing outside, playing in the backyard. Like we had like swing set and play stuff in the backyard, or in the basement of my house, like a little toy room. Growing up, I have several aunts and uncles here too, that on my mother's side, and then a lot of cousins who were older, but they're kind of like aunt and uncle to us growing up too. So between like my house and being outside and playing with my friends and riding my bike and playing with dolls and stuff, I was fortunate to have an enclosed front porch. So it was like multi-seasonal. So you could be out there all the time. So we're just from the generation of like, get outside. Yeah. and find something to do or find somebody to play with. And then having a lot of cousins. And then I do have an older brother and a younger sister too. So just being surrounded by like my family. So aunt's house, uncle's houses, friends' houses, riding our bikes. Just that kind of stuff is what I finally remember. So I'll start back in elementary school. I don't really remember how much, but I did go to Caldwell elementary school. So we were just a walk. Like it was probably, 10, 15-minute walk to school. Middle school, I got involved in band. I remember that being like the first big thing. Like you could choose band or choir. So I did band from, played the clarinet from middle school all the way up to high school. So that was something. Student council, her name was Miss Lori Shank. Harani is her name now, but she was Miss Shank. She got us involved with just kind of making decisions and planning events and things like that for our peers in middle school. I'm a big nerd. I love to read. So a lot of my childhood also was spent in the library. So either my mom would like take me and like drop me off and come and pick me up, or when I got old enough to ride my bike all the way down. Because it was kind of this unwritten rule of like you knew where the boundaries were. And Albion was like either crosstown depending on where you live. So for me living on this side of the track, like where's the railroad track?
Yep.
And where can you go on this side of the railroad tracks? So you stay on this side. So when I was old enough to cross Austin Ave, which intersects with Eaton Street, then I could like ride my bike down to the library. So between reading, being involved in those kind of school-based activities, I didn't really play sports in middle school, but I loved to watch my friends play. So a lot of my time was also spent like learning, just learning the game. So learning volleyball, learning basketball, and then I would do the write-ups for them. So Albion Recorder. Oh, wow. My mom, when she would pick me up from the event, like they let me like handwrite out like the stats. So my friends could be, represented in the newspaper. So you knew how many points they had. Or if they won the game. So a lot of that was me able to author. I don't know if I was ever interested in journalism to that degree, but I just like to just be there and support, and I wanted to make sure that they got acknowledged. So I did spend time doing that in middle school. High school was still involved, like with student council, student organizations. I did begin to play sports then, so I played volleyball my freshman year. I really wasn't my thing, but I fell in love in middle school with track and field. I didn't run. I did the field events. So shot put is what you can do in middle school, and shot put and discus once you get to high school. So I got connected with great coaches. The first coach was my 8th grade middle school coach was Mr. Walt Pinkham. Okay. And I was in a class with one of his daughters, Sarah Pinkham. So like he showed me the first this is a thing, and I was always bigger. So I'm like, I have to run. Because I wasn't running anywhere. Yeah, no running for me. But so to be able to find something that I gravitated towards, and I can move from being a spectator and then also participating in. So then that built upon me doing shot put and discus in high school. The best coach ever, Mr. Brad Shedd, was my high school coach from the 9th grade up to graduation. And because of him, like losing weight, learning the sport, learning to love to like work out and run, and so grateful for that experience. And I don't know because I know the high school shut down around 2015-ish, I believe, or maybe a little bit before. But I had the record for a very long time for shot put, and that's just because it just was a great experience. So still did band, still did student council as class president up until I was student council president my senior year, and then involved in the community events. I was connected with opportunities through Dr. Harry Bonner. Okay. He kept us doing something positive. So grateful. Like from summer camps to college visits to spending the night, like week-long opportunities. We did a lot at Michigan State University. He had us in 4-H. We just were doing stuff that like you just didn't know what you liked until you tried it. And he gave safe spaces and opportunities and funding for us to take advantage of that. So a lot of my time, even in high school, was then given back for being like a counselor for the youth in some of the summer camps that Dr. Bonner ran. So I think that kind of captures between band and the sports. And then I still did statistics for a lot of the sports, like wrestling. I learned wrestling to do the bookkeeping. Wow. Basketball for women's basketball, or at that time, volleyball. So I feel like I'd be a statistician. Had I known about sports like management and the way that I do now, and that it is really a lucrative career too, or sports information management, that would have been I love, especially like the fun, active, like contact sports, watching and spectating in that regard. But those kind of opportunities that I try to take advantage of to stay busy. And if I wasn't doing that, I'm a homebody too. Like I don't mind being at home. I love things like Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune and reading. I do a lot of reading.
Wow. I think that like the involvement that you've had and like the clear passion that you're talking about how there's so much to do in Albion, especially for our youth, that still lives on. That's great. And, being able to see like there's still opportunities for our students to be able to go do MSU visits and doing stays. And then, there's all these other after school activities that people are trying to put on so our students still can find a home within Albion, so they can have those fond memories and experiences that you were sharing. So, well, thank you for sharing that. So the community has changed quite a bit since you were in school. Like you kind of mentioned, our school system shut down in the mid 2010. So I'm kind of curious though, like comparatively, what do you think is some of like the biggest things from your childhood that were key? Like being outside, could tell is a big one. But what are some of those like key parts that from when you were growing up that may be different from the students who are growing up now?
Yeah, so at that point, there were 4 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. So you all came together at you know, as you're in like the preteen years. So I know when a lot of the reasons that the school system, the breakdown, right, in the structure of that, where you get the school of choice, right, so you can start to send your kids to places where you think they have better opportunities, and that's a priority for parents. Like I understand that, but I do think that was a connecting factor. Like I didn't experience any kind of negative. Like I don't know if the generation above us just kept us shielded differently, but the kind of things that kids are dealing with now, from like bullying and like the racism and just add on whatever ism, just access to information and technology in a different kind of way. No, you made connections like in real time, in real life, and they were interest-based, right? So I guess where I'm headed with that, like the opportunity to know, like everybody from it didn't matter if they were your neighborhood or not, like you were all coming together for those opportunities in school. So you're in the same classes, on the same sports teams, seeing each other in the cafeteria, doing these after school things. So I do think that kind of camaraderie and opportunities to like build that social network is something that I just stand upon. A lot of what I'll talk about tonight, I don't have very long to talk in terms of the keynote that I'm doing this evening for the MLK Convocation for the college and or sponsored by the college and the Albion branch of the NAACP. It's just my friends, and it just looks like just a rainbow of people, and we were connected over interest, and that's not the same today. And I do think a lot of that interest-based connection was just coming together, and you didn't have a choice. We have Albion at that point the high school was about 500, so each class was a little bit over 100 students, but you just connected because you saw each other every day.
Yeah, you didn't have a choice.
So you weren't going to Concord or having to pick through Marshall or having to, Lumen Christi or a lot of the other places I know where students were starting to go when kind of school of choice became a thing here. But that's just something that you just knew. Middle school and high school, you were all together.
Yeah. Wow. So how would you say growing up in Albion then impacted your career path?
Yeah, so I do think it was a shock. Well, I wanted to be an educator, so I'll put that out there first, right? So level of education differed like along the way. I wanted to initially be a high school Spanish teacher.
Okay.
But I think education is a connector, right? For me, it's an opportunity, and it was a way to do something different. I didn't share it. Like my father did work in those hard grilling days at the Malibu. That's just not a career path that I wanted. My mom, when she retired, she went on as what they called an unskilled maintenance worker, but she was a janitor. And I don't have anything against those types of career paths or opportunities or job types because they sustain my family, that blue collar work. That's just nothing I wanted. I didn't want that. So I knew I needed to, we couldn't afford, right? They weren't writing checks. At least my parents couldn't to write off for tuition. So I had to do good in school. So education, was always been important because of great teachers. I wanted to go on and be a high school teacher at that point in time. So remind me, let's go back to the original question.
No worries. Yeah. So how did growing up in Albion impact your career path then?
So now where I was headed with that, because we had, because I just had friends, Albion prepared me to be able to see people for who they are, the good in people, connect with people over interests, the things that you like, where you didn't have that layer of these things that kind of keep people apart and separate and, the dissension because of it. So Albion, I think, was a great, equalizer in that way. Like, you notice, like, some friends' houses were nicer. Some people, had opportunities to do, like, summer vacations. Like, my family did do that kind of stuff. But you weren't talked about, you weren't bullied because of it. Like, we just tried to help in and step in. Like, there's so many people who helped to fill the gaps for me that my parents couldn't, right? Because either work or just not having like the funding to do it. But I still got a chance to do a lot of the stuff that folks who had more money had an opportunity to do because people knew that I was serious. Education was important, getting good grades, and they looked at my potential. And I think that's why people, this community, helped support me in that kind of way. So Albion helped to dictate the career path and just wanting to be an educator, be in education because I had great teachers, and then also just wanting to help. Like that's my favorite thing. And no matter what job I've had, to be able to have somebody come to my office or, to my team, and the first thing I can say is, how can I help you, right? From that service-based standpoint, I learned that here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
It's great to hear. So what kind of led you to leaving Albion then? Like, how did you know it was time?
Yeah, college. And a little bit of, like, I have old school parents. I told you with my dad, like, that was kind of the philosophy of my mom, too. Like, when we got 18, like, you got the summer. You got to figure it out. You're either going to work or you're going to school, but you're getting out of here. Right? So, like, yeah, we can come home if we needed to, if we ran into a moment. But when I left for college at 18, like, I haven't lived here since. I may have lived here, like, the summer of my freshman year of college, but then I started to work and just have things to do. I went to Central Michigan University, so I spent most of my summers after that in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. But so part of it didn't really have a choice, unless we wanted to. I couldn't have stayed in. I probably couldn't. Well, couldn't or even wanted to, right? Because you go into independence, you want to be able to do some things on your own, like move out of my mom's house. I said, my father was here in Albion too, like was raised by my mom, single parent household, like since elementary with myself and my sister and my brother. So opportunities, college, and then I ended up going to grad school in Indiana. So I kind of lived adjacent to Michigan. I lived in Indiana, Ohio. Now I'm right outside of, or western Pennsylvania, which still feels like the Midwest when compared to places like Philadelphia. So within a 5-hour drive, so if I need to get home for an emergency, like I can do that. But wanted to go out and explore, and then part of it too, just like the opportunities that education led me to. But yeah, definitely the time was because I was eager. I was ready. Like my stuff for college was probably ready to go. It's like the day I graduated from high school. I was just excited to start the next chapter. Yeah.
So over the years, you've earned numerous college degrees, including a bachelor's degree in Spanish from Central Michigan University, 2 master's degrees in African American and African Diaspora Studies and Higher Education and Student Affairs from Indiana University, and a doctorate degree in Administrative and Policy Studies, Higher Education Management concentration from the University of Pittsburgh. First of all, just wow. Wow. That is a lot of education. Yeah. And like you've been talking, like it's clear that education has been your path, but like rooting all the way back to your childhood then, like have you always had that passion for education? And what kind of motivated you to continue to get and earn these college degrees?
Yeah, so I kind of blame my parents for that one. Like my dad, if he had it his way, I'd be a lawyer. Like he always used to be like, oh, come on, let's watch Perry Mason, or I watch Matlock a lot, like these kind of lawyer-based shows. But they bought, at some point, like this kind of old slate, like big, like poster size, like chalkboard. And I just remember like making my sister sit, like having my dolls and stuffed animals and like teaching her. We're like almost 2 years apart, about 17 months apart. So I just remember wanting to between her and like some of my smaller cousins, like, all right, time to sit down. They knew with me we were going to read, or I played with baby dolls and stuff like that. But for me, the passion was, I love trivia type things. So I was grateful that my parents brought things where I'm always learning, like, and asking questions, and just figuring out stuff that I didn't know, like watching Jeopardy since the time I can remember. I know my dad used to come home. He worked the kind of second shift because he would come home around 7 o'clock. We watched Wheel of Fortune together, and by the time he ate his lunch, Jeopardy was coming on around 7:30. Or I don't remember if it was the flip. But around the 7 o'clock hour, just always just being intrigued by like learning just useless, senseless stuff. Just like, well, why do you need to know that? I don't know, but I think it's interesting. So I do blame my parents for just kind of putting that bug, even though I think my dad really was pushing the lawyer route. But I think he's thinking more of, money and career and opportunities. But it's just what I like to do, like just to show people, and then also to continue learning. Like I feel like I'm a lifelong learner in that. So that just sparked the career interest. In 8th grade, I had my first like official Spanish class, and I fell in love. Had a great teacher, Senora Joan Copper, and wanting to do the work that she did. She just made Spanish fun. She made learning fun. And I just love the culture too, like the Hispanic culture. So just being able to learn about the different countries and regions, how things differ. So I initially wanted to be a high school Spanish teacher. And getting all the way up to Central, my first class, and we had to do classroom observations. We had to pick 3 different schools, like kind of from like the demographic. So I remember going to like a rural school, a school like an urban, like in the Detroit area. And then one of the observations I did was right here in the high school, I think with her. And by the end of that experience, I was like, there's no way. Like I can't do high school because it's just... you just want a different kind of like, for me, I guess I just assumed everybody, because a lot of my friend group, like we just like school differently, and then being able to see that, well, everybody's just here for different reasons, and I'm here to teach and learn. So I was like, well, maybe we'll move it up a level. So I've teach at the college level.
Okay.
Then students, like, you want to be here, you're paying to be here, and you're differently committed to the education and the educational process, because I was like, there's no way. Like I was born with gray hair, but I'd probably be gray, a lot grayer, a lot sooner had I taken that high school route. But I'll think about it now as I'm like, as a second career path, like if I'm ever done with higher education, like will I have, I think I have a different level of patience to go back and think about the high school, because those years are important, and students do need like those mentors and positive role models at that level too. So kind of roundabout of, like I said, that first chalkboard and the talk and just the feel of it. And then my sister was my first student, right? With little kids. I don't know, maybe teaching her how to write her name or something like that. But I just like to do that. Yeah.
So how did you end up at the Community College of Allegheny County?
Okay. Yeah. So I told you high school, wanted to be a high school Spanish teacher, but so get to Central and I switched to general Spanish.
Okay.
And I was in a program called, it's a federally funded TRIO program, McNair Scholars, and it was meant to increase a representation of underrepresented people and underrepresented folks in their different career paths. So like men in nursing, African Americans, and just a lot of career paths in general. So to increase representation of those with a doctorate. So that was planted at Central, and that's what took me to Indiana University.
Okay.
So that's where along the way in McNair, because I always thought I was going to then be a college professor.
Okay.
They advised, like, well, get your master's in something that you love to teach. I get a chance now to talk about one of the best teachers ever, Mr. Robert Wall. We can call him Bobby Wall. Now, I was really great friends with his triplets in high school. We were kind of stacked in terms of graduation years. And when I took that African American history class with him, like must have been junior and senior years of high school, just opened up to like my history in a way that you usually get a small paragraph in textbooks. You learn about the Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks or Harriet Tubman and maybe Malcolm X, but like just the breadth of that was definitely an interest. And at Central, they didn't have an African American studies degree, but they kind of had a lot of classes that you can kind of piece together, and a lot of them happen to be in political science. Had I known about sociology, I probably would have did a sociology minor, but I did a political science minor. So I went to IU with the intent of getting that master's in African American studies, just so it is a subject area that I can teach, and I do continue to teach it now. But the path was to be higher education faculty professor. But then you talk about, I was like, I'm going to school since I was 4 years old. I got tired after that first master's. And for whatever reason, like during the first master's, I applied for that second one in higher ed. So I rolled over to that because that was more practitioner based. Like I can get a job and go to work. African American history at a master's isn't really a standalone degree. It needs to be coupled with something. So that's when I pursued the higher ed student affairs to become a practitioner. And then I jumped over to working as an administrator on college campuses and also teaching kind of on the side in adjunct roles. So that opportunity, like I moved around from different institutions, all kind of in the umbrella of multicultural or diversity affairs and helping students differently. So the academic support for underrepresented students or being out in the community, working alongside these multicultural organizations, ensuring that from a policy standpoint, that's really what I do now, that we are creating fair and equitable opportunities that don't have barriers for certain groups to pursue and succeed and thrive in higher education. So they kind of all built upon those different roles. I found myself I was in Indianapolis, Indiana, working for the IU system at that time, and the opportunity opened up at Washington and Jefferson College.
Okay.
In Washington, Pennsylvania. And for me, like I was always advised, so you don't want to get pigeonholed in just everything diversity, because we can talk about that. See where we're at now on the federal level, where a lot of diversity initiatives are being dismantled. Higher education, like we're on the kind of next slate of, I think, executive orders that are coming down the pipeline, limiting our office's existence and the kind of work that we can do. So that job at Washington and Jefferson College was also, assistant dean of students, and also the director of diversity and multicultural programs. So I had an opportunity to kind of expand and kind of have a laboratory of like other functional areas within student affairs. And then I was there for about 6 years, and during that time I did get my doctorate at the University of Pittsburgh. So then it was kind of a natural opportunity of like, all right, well, what's next? I was it was very similar to Albion College, a small Division III residential, 98% of the students lived on campus, and you got a chance to see the 24-hour cycle of students. And I was over also our emergency call system. So when students, if you're sick in the middle of the night, hospital, whatever kind of student activity that goes on when the sun goes down, like if it involved an emergency. So I have like my work phone and then my personal phone. And I felt like for those 6 years, I never got a complete night's sleep, because you just always anticipated the phone going off, and for whatever way you needed to be there to support students. So I was ready to give that up too. I was like, I don't, that's not a trophy to me. Some people it is, like to have a work phone, like I'm okay, like with my work day ending at some point. And for those 6 years, it didn't. It was a 24-hour role. And when you were on call, you could be like more than 20 minutes away from campus. So I just wanted to be able to explore career-wise something different. And also with the new degree that was focused on policy studies, an opportunity opened up at the Community College of Allegheny County. And I started there as a civil rights investigator for issues of Title IX, so sex and gender-based discrimination, and also managing our non-discrimination policy. And that was welcomed. Yeah, just a different change of pace. No work phone, like work 8:30 to 4:30, and then got a chance to just explore Pittsburgh and not be connected to work, like on a 24-hour cycle. And then for me, a breather too, because think about the 24-hour work while also working full time and also pursuing a doctorate degree. It just was a lot. So CCAC was a breath of fresh air career wise.
That's great to hear, and it's such an interesting path that you've taken in terms of your education and how you've been able to apply it in different ways too. I feel like that's something that we don't always think about. Like as someone who also went to Albion College, you don't always think about like what kind of degrees could then build to a different kind of career or furthering your education like in those realms. So I'd love to know a little bit more of what it truly means to be a Chief Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer, because it's going to differ depending on the sector, the institution, and like the priorities of the institution. Because some is just there because like it sounds like it should be the right thing to do, right? I think from a lot of different standpoints, but definitely from like culture, like the institutional, like politics or the city that you live in or the institution that you're at, like you should just kind of have that person. And sometimes they're a resource and sometimes they're not. I've been fortunate to be in places where they are a resource and are there to make meaningful change. So I do think the role broadly is to ensure that there are opportunities for all, like in their welcoming environments and at the institution or within the organization. And there's some things you just have to be intentional about, because if you're not, then it breeds disparity, it breeds inequitable practices, it facilitates an environment where some people, like work isn't a good place to be, because it's not a good experience when you get there based off of something that makes you unique and that should be celebrated, like your background and your heritage and those kind of other, defining like diverse characteristics that we all have, right? And it's the DE&I officer, Chief Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer, is there to support all. Like it's not there for just Black people or brown people or people from this, sexual orientation. It's there to make sure that everybody in our intersectionality like can be celebrated at work and not just tolerated, right? So, and those opportunities for, what I didn't mention, what I loved growing up from Albion, is that we got a space to be culturally curious. I remember going to different churches, like from denominations with my friends, like the Festival of Forks, like is for me the culmination, right, of that one time of year where everybody came together and we celebrated heritage. So that's what it was like when I was growing up. And each classroom had like a different theme that tied into something, and learning and exploring like your culture and your heritage and your tradition. So having friends from different backgrounds and being able to participate in quinceañeras for my, friends who celebrated that in terms of their heritage. just those kind of opportunities. So I get a chance to do that every day, and to ensure that our policies are being enforced. Like my office now, so for the Chief Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer at CCAC in my current role, kind of a threefold or three branches to my office. The first branch is to manage our non-discrimination policy, and most organizations have them. They can start to look a little different just because we're at a crossroads in what this looks like across the country. So, no discrimination and harassment based on sex, gender, religion, veteran status, ability, those types of things. So when we have complaints that discrimination or harassment has occurred, my office is the space where we do investigations throughout the organization for students and for employees. So I manage a team that does that for civil rights and Title IX. And then we also have just general programming, education, workshops, opportunities for people to come together, managing our employee resource groups that are interest-based and some are cultural based as well. And then we also have a couple of grant opportunities. One provides support for students who have been experienced gun violence on some level. So an opportunity for them to shift their expand career opportunities outside of whatever, they may be restricted to in terms of their neighborhoods or their exposure to that kind of climate in their neighborhoods. And then we also have another grant open now that supports more of the Title IX, so sex and gender-based or sexual violence education. So that's where I spend a lot of my time working with our faculty. Like, how do we promote inclusive classrooms? Like those things that we do that may not be intentional, but could affect the work environment for employees and the learning environment for students based on something that can be in this capacity of diversity, equity, inclusion. So pretty busy with that, and maintaining that CCAC does value. Yeah. And it's not just there for lip service or just a show or like a spot on the organization chart. Like, that is an expectation. Everybody who is a part of that institution feels like they belong and that they're welcomed and that they're going to be able to thrive while they're there.
So alongside with this role then, are you still currently teaching any courses? What are you currently teaching?
So I teach on the side. So I teach for CCAC. They do permit that administrators can teach up to one class a term. So there I teach, it's housed in our history department, but it's a part of the Ethnic and Diversity Studies certificate degree program. Okay. So I teach African American History 1 and African American History 2. So one focuses on kind of prehistory Africa through the Reconstruction, and then part 2 picks up with Reconstruction to the present. Wow. So I'm excited to teach those classes when there's an opportunity. It gets a lot busy now, like the administrative role has changed. Now having this vice president position and then being responsible. CCAC is a multi-campus institution, so kind of very similar to KCC. So we have 5 campuses and 3 centers. So just managing all of that. So teaching, when I get the opportunity, I'll definitely take advantage of that. And then I do still teach online with the institution. Okay. I started teaching there with African American history classes, but they've expanded to, I teach an ethics course that in a workplace, diversity in the workplace, and just basic like sociology 101 kind of classes too. For the University of Phoenix. So I'm always on the background. Yeah. So I've been a teacher in higher ed or a faculty member longer than I have been an administrator. Okay. So kind of going back to that advice I have when I was telling you about McNair, like always have this kind of passion or this discipline that you can teach on the side, because for me it helps to make it more well-rounded. I would always walk the middle. I don't want to be 100% administrator, don't want to be 100% in the classroom, so I get a chance to kind of walk that fine line in the middle and have influence in both.
Wow. So it still sounds like you get pretty full days then.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. As much as you walked away from that 24-hour one.
Yeah. So maybe when I go to bed though, like I know I can sleep.
Yeah, you can sleep through the night.
Yeah, that's a big difference. But yeah, you're right. Balancing the kind of 9 to 5, and then when I get home, the kind of part 2 of the teaching piece. I've been doing that. Yeah.
But it's something you enjoy, which is amazing. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and then I do like for both institutions, like, with the community college, our demographic is a lot different. And I love the traditional, the 18 and 22-year-olds too, but being able to work across generations. We have 6 generations of students at CCAC. Like our youngest student enrolled in credit classes since I've been at the institution was 9. all the way up to students in their, 80s plus. So that multi-generational open access factor is appealing to me with the Community College of Allegheny County. And then I love working with the University of Phoenix because it is primarily focused on adult learners. So those who are trying to figure out, like, how can I incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion in my career path? So a lot in healthcare, a lot in business. So across those disciplines, to be able to kind of share ideas and thoughts on how we could involve and insert into, like, the fabric of the work that we do, the things that are very important to me, that's all wrapped up in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
That, like, perfectly leads to my next question for you. So kind of looking beyond the academic setting then, are there any tools or programs that you recommend for other fields of work to implement to create welcoming spaces?
Yeah, I think we have to do the work to understand our employees, right? So I think everybody is not like a cookie cutter. They don't walk into your organization or your institution with the same kind of lived experience. So I think, and that's, people make DE&I, and especially now, like, it's this terrible thing, and it's just weaponized and politicized. Like, no, it is to create these spaces so that folks can, most of them are spending more time at work than they are with their families, right? So, and just to be just good people. So I told you that's for me, what I appreciate growing up here in Albion and living here, just to be able to not have these superficial labels and barriers in place where you just get to know people for people, and you can connect on a different level, from, like, interests and things that you like to do, or things that you just kind of want to explore and learn in a curious way, in a respectful way. So I think that's part of the work across every institution. Like, don't have the approach that D&I is this kind of hammer that you're coming down with, and you're looking out for these things to have people violating whatever policy. Like, no, it is there to be inclusive, right? And that you belong. So I think you need to know who is a part of your team or part of your organization, and then create opportunities for cross-cultural dialogue. Like, do the people in finance have an opportunity to go and work with the people who are in a different area of human resources, right? Like, create these opportunities for people to come together and have that kind of cross-cultural learning experience, so that you can learn from, like, this person and their background and, like, the places they've been in the world and traveled. There's just the things that you talk about with your friends, right? And I'm not saying, like, your colleagues have to be your friends, but I am saying you spend a lot of time with them. So being able to know them creates a better opportunity for everybody to enjoy coming together in that workplace experience. So now, thinking, if you don't have the capacity within, like, there are always folks that you can consult with in terms of bringing in outside. And sometimes you have to know too, like, part of my job is to know, like, Ketwana, is this something that you can manage, or will this team or this area benefit from having an external voice to come in and kind of help reset, right? Or re-energize or re-synergize or recalibrate whatever the diversity, the DEI issue is. So I think it's multifaceted of creating spaces where people aren't doing these intentional or even unintentional things that create barriers or bad experiences for people in the workplace environment, and then also just promoting that you care and you want to get to know the people who you're spending most of your day with. Yeah.
So then what motivates you personally in this work, and what did you find, like, most rewarding about being either the chief DEI officer or professor?
Yeah. So the most rewarding for me is that no 2 days look the same. So whatever the challenge or opportunity is, like, I do like routine things, but I also like to help problem solve, right? So where is the challenge? Like, how can I help be solutions focused or solutions based to make sure that, folks have what they need to be successful as a student or as an employee, especially in my current role at CCAC. So I do, even though I loved too what I did in the investigation work. So I started at CCAC as a civil rights investigator, moved up to be the civil rights compliance officer, and then that entailed being the ADA 504 coordinator. So making sure that we have a grievance process in place for any type of violations dealing with disability, and also the Title IX coordinator, so to make sure we had this grievance process that was managed for anybody who may experience sex or gender-based discrimination. But that work is tiring too, like, and it's heavy to have those kind of, have to support people at those kind of low or moments or just personal experiences that's tough, right, to deal with, especially with the 18 to 22-year-old, like, college, talking about things like sexual assault or just those kind of emergencies and situations that took place. So I do appreciate that about the no 2 days look the same in my administrative role. And then for teaching, on the first day, like we just kind of talk about our experiences of learning, like formally African American history, and the hands that aren't raised, the people who say like this is the first time, right? And I have students who've been in from 16 years old. I had she might have been 15, a homeschool student, through students who were in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And from a formal education standpoint, I think it's a disservice because Black history, African American history is American history. And we see where there's efforts to roll that back. Currently with this presidential transition, it has to be a part of the curriculum. It's not just a February thing, a thing that just was validating for me. And I didn't have it formally until I was in Mr. Wall's class in the 11th grade. And anything that I can do to help prevent that from being another experience, especially for people who look like me that are, African American or identify as Black, that contributed to this country's success in a multitude of ways. And it shouldn't take you to go to college and everybody doesn't have the opportunity or the desire to do that, to be able to start to learn about that. So that's the most gratifying. And then when the students show the appreciation for that and wish they had it earlier, but I can plant the seed. Just because it's not taught formally doesn't mean that you can, information, especially now, is at your fingertips. And you can then go on to, what is the aspects of African American history that interest you most, that you can continue to learn about outside of this classroom experience.
So do you have any tips that you could share about how we individually can work towards creating welcoming environments for all?
Yeah, so for me, it's just at the core of I think about, I don't ever want to make somebody's day bad, right? So I come in here and I walk into the spaces I'm in, work or not. I don't want to be part of a moment that somebody's having a bad day or a bad time or a negative experience. So I think if we can come from that lens, and then I can learn and I can grow from people. The things that we've been kind of more indoctrinated to think about barriers or to keep us from asking questions, making new friends, being differently social, hiding behind, I call them keyboard gangsters. I hate looking at comments on, and I think for all the great things that social media and the internet bring along, it gets discouraging when people can hide behind the anonymity of that. Because you wouldn't say it to people in their face. Right? So I try to be the same person, when the sun is out and when it goes down, and in your face and out of your face. And I think if we could do that, as just a collective, just see our humanity, then that's the best place to start, because then we eliminate or at least, diminish some of these other things that become the challenges that come along with how people try to paint with the broad stroke that D&I is something terrible or, woke. And actually, no, it's not. It's quite the opposite. We kind of have to start with self. So I do think that self-learning, that self exploration, and for me, I don't like to see people hurt. I just don't. I've always been like that. I don't want to see people mistreated. I don't like to see people hurt. And I do think that I can learn something from others. So I want to keep the door open, not the door closed. So I think if more people held that perspective, then a lot of the stuff that's kind of distractions on the side, let them stay over there, because we're on a different mission, to empower folks, to help people learn, to help them be better family members, to help them be better colleagues, to help them be better students. And that's the kind of stuff that we want in the world. The people in our past, the Dr. Martin Luther King generation, fought a lot, right, for us to be where we are in terms of civil rights and seeing humanity. So to not let their work be in vain, we kind of have to carry that torch forward. Yeah.
So my favorite question to wrap up the podcast with every guest, and since you're still really connected to Albion in different ways in your history, I would love to know what you hope for the future of Albion.
Yeah. We talked about opportunities for youth, and every time, I haven't been home since 2019. It was my 20th. I'm dating myself now. 20th high school reunion. We got it in right before the pandemic, and we should have been celebrating 25 years last year. But even though the people here, the look, Albion, I feel like another building is torn down. When I go back to have those nostalgic moments, I'm oh, we just kind of see the plot of land. So I do wish for like some revitalization so that the youth, in terms of just knowing that folks care about them, they kind of can have those facilities, the buildings, the restaurants, the things that people are leaving. Right? I understand you have to have people in order for a lot of these establishments to be able to continue. But if I had the opportunity to pour into this community, like economically, because it does, it's disheartening to me just to see how some of the places that like were near and dear, these are not existed or not like boarded up or could use a fresh, paint. Like part of what we did in some of our summer camps is going around to beautify the community, right? And that's my hope, so that I do think it will give a different visual, I think, connection and experience to the youth, and then not have it so that you're getting to an age and then you're just leaving and not coming back. So so I did ride around a little bit yesterday when I got in there today, so it did make me sad to see the conditions of some of the establishments, or the fact that they're not here anymore. Like to see the plot of land. So I wish there could be a fresh, some economic vitality that'll keep this community going.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
That's it for this episode of Brick by Brick. We'll be back with more stories from the heart of Albion. Until then, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep building Albion's future.